Good morning, everyone. One of the things I know is that there are keynotes, there are plenary sessions, and then there are breakout sessions. And this is a breakout session. And I want to get us to kind of know where people are coming from. How many people here have an executive director type role? Okay. The reason I said type is I'll default mostly to CEO. And it's not because I'm disrespecting the executive director title. It's because your boards don't understand what that means. Your boards understand what a CEO is. And so when I'm coaching board members, I want them to give you the respect and the authority that you deserve. So that's why you'll often hear me slipping to CEO. How many people are, this is not a trick question, not the leader of the organization, but the head of fundraising for it? Okay. What are the rest of you from? Communications. Okay, how many people marketing? Oh, this is great because you're going to be able to tell your bosses this is what you have to be saying. That's wonderful. What's that? Or write it for them. Absolutely. One of the, writing in other people's voices is something, okay, that's great. Thanks, Sherry. Anybody else that I missed? Volunteers? Okay. Major gifts officer. Well, that's not just running it, but who are major gifts? Those are my people. Okay, and then development, what area of development do you do? Grants. Awesome. Any other grant folks? You guys can talk. No. Hey, Eric. Board members. Okay, how many board members are in this audience? Whether you're employed by a nonprofit or not. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, round of applause. Come on. Running a nonprofit is one of the weirdest things for most people because executive directors, in a company, you own the company. You call the shots, and you have customers that you serve. And that's fairly straightforward, even though those customers, sometimes it would be better if there weren't those squirrely customers. But other than that, it's pretty straightforward. When people take on, either because they see a need and they fill it and they create a nonprofit, or they move for a second career half sort of life change and they move into nonprofits, they realize how complex our lives are. Because as the leader of a nonprofit, you're not only, first of all, you give up your ownership. The minute you create a 501c3, you've given it to the community. There's a board that is now your boss. You are not the boss. So there's a humility and a humblingness of a character development that you do by giving over the control to some other group and trusting them. And then you have your staff who often knows better than you do about their area. That's why you hired them. And they'll tell you that often, that they know better, but they don't have the full picture. And then they have the people that you serve, which is why you thought you got into the nonprofit in the first place, or the cause that you serve. And then you have these squirrely people called donors. And all of a sudden you're at a conference like this learning, I gotta love these people too, but I got into it to feed, to save lives and save acres and conserve and I've got to please them too. So hats off to all of you, and board members, thank you, because you're the ones that in your best space are helping the people you hire, the ED, the CEO, stay sane. I've known most of the leaders that we're going to talk about today is how basically CEOs and board members, now I think about it, thanks for saying that, Eric, can help keep the sanity without it becoming a spreadsheet or a calendar. We want the calendar brain, we want the spreadsheet brain like Kivy was talking about, but there are stories can help organize that without having to speak the dialect of spreadsheet or calendar. One of the things that we know from the leadership report that we did 6 years ago, it feels like 6 years ago, day 2 in the conference, 6 months ago, the leadership report we did, we said that leaders said telling a compelling vision was one of their top 3 priorities for the year. Something that they knew they really wanted to do. But 2 out of 3 said it was their biggest challenge, and 62% of the people that responded to our survey said, we don't even know how to do it. We don't even know how to create a compelling vision, which is a little scary because in nonprofits, we're all about values and motivation and extending beyond ourselves. We have the best stories around. Why is it that when we have all that value stuff, it seems like we should be all rainbows and unicorns, all blissful harmony. We're all together in this. It's all kumbaya around the Alfred's Group campfire, and life is just wonderful and rosy. But it doesn't feel that way, does it? It often feels like this tug of war where everybody's pulling, and my people and my team. One of my clients, I said I was working with their development team, and he said, I don't call them a team. Oh, okay, they're a unit. And I said, why are they a unit? Which to me is a 4-letter word for team. But why are they a unit? He said, because everybody else on our staff is always pulling for their team. And I think our entire nonprofit is a team in this together. And we're just a part of that team. And so he's trying to use language and story to try to fight this that's going on. Why is it that way? Well, what do you think I'm going to say the one-word reason that this type of fighting happens is? Okay, thank you for playing. Money, ego, politics, time. You guys are much more creative than I am. Lack of direction, okay. What is this conference about? It's about stories. Yeah, so that's why there's a book there. I'm glad this is good. I'm really glad to know it wasn't obvious to everyone, but thank you. Let's have a little more cathartic moment. Why else are people fighting and making life difficult for us? Oh, no, I was like, get it out. Let's just process this stuff. Money, time, they don't like what we're doing. Okay, stories, good. That's what is amazing to us. We've been telling stories around the campfire for millennia. We've actually have some of the earliest art is stories of people, depending on how you date it, millennia ago, talking about the one that got away. And this was helpful for them, telling the story of how they got their dinner, made it so that others could get their dinner too. But it's something that's coded in our DNA. Has anybody read the book, Kendall Haven's book, Story Proof? All right. No. All right. So just remember that this is yes, in where I'm coming from, and this is no. Well, I was in India, and so we'd ask if we could do something, and the person would do their little figure 8, and that was a yes. And I didn't know that, so we kind of get this. We're not sure what you're saying. They're saying yes, but your head is saying no. So, anybody have you read Kendall Haven's Story Proof? No. All right, good. This guy did the heavy lifting research for you. This table, you guys, thank you. We're together. Thank you. I'm appreciative of that. Thank you. He reviewed all sorts of academic studies: sociology, neurology, anthropology. He was looking for the narrative form, is what he calls it, which is storytelling. But he was looking to see what the research showed on story. And in good science method, you have a hypothesis, and then is it antithesis maybe, and then you come together to synthesis. You think something's going to happen, and you try to prove it right or wrong, and then you come together in the middle. What he found with researching all of these, in one chapter, he looks at 120 reviews that encompass over, I think, 800 actual studies. What he found was nobody in all these studies refutes the power of story. They're part of the DNA, the way we're structured. If you want to have kids get math better, understand how to do math better, you tell them a story. You teach them narrative structure. My kids at home right now, we're homeschooling, so that's why they're at home right now. It's not that we're being irresponsible. They're learning the grammatical words that go with math. So when they put together a mathematical equation, it's a story structure. And my 11-year-old daughter, she's doing NaNoWriMo. 50,000 words to write a novel in the month of November. There's a kid version of 30,000, and she had hit halfway by day 2. So yeah, can't wait to see. She's so excited. She's like, Dad, okay, you publish books. Do you know the publisher? And for 6 out of 8 of them, it's me. Even though it doesn't look like me, it's still me. I self-publish a lot. And so she's like, could I have an in? Could I get my story? And then she's all, and you're getting smarter, Dad. You're having editors now look at your book before you publish them, which is good. You learn I'm a ready, fire, aim sort of. Okay, I fired, I missed. Where would I want to aim? So she's like, she's already contacted my editor to see if she would edit this book. And my graphic designer is great. And she's asked him what would it cost for her to get a cover. And he said, do you want the spine in the back also? And she said, well, yeah, it's a book. So anyway, she's learned story from a very young age because my wife and I knew that this was something that's important, and the science shows it. What's shocking to us is that we don't employ this in our nonprofits as well. Now, I know we're at this conference, so I wanted to show that there's money attached to it too. Harvard Business Review did a blog, and I love the age we live in where people are actually testing this stuff out. I don't understand the ethics of some of their testing, but they took 2 toasters bought off eBay, gently used toasters, and they sold them. One they told a story with, and one they just sold. The one that they told the story with, they sold for much more, like $35 instead of $5. So can you imagine, as a leader of your nonprofit, how this would work in fundraising? The better story we saw with Sean, the better story you tell, the more money you could bring in. But can you imagine also for all of you in your own personal careers, if you are able to tell your story better, your net worth in your job could go higher? We just did a how to get a raise session for Mazarine Trays in the spring, a couple of us, how to negotiate your career. And it's all about personal leadership. And this storytelling stuff that you're learning here, I hope you'll also challenge yourself to think about, how does this apply to my own life? What are the things that have motivated me? And we're going to go through a 5-part structure that will work for your organization, but also in the back of your mind, be thinking about, what does this say about my life too? All right, so you can black out there. Has anybody studied Gestalt therapy? Okay, could you come up and teach what this is? No, okay, because I love this, and I think it's a Kineza triangle. I will give you the slides, and I've got the credits and photo credits underneath it and the Wikipedia blurb about what this triangle is. It's called a Kineza triangle. What do you see up there? What are you looking at when you see this? 2 triangles. Star. Yeah, Star, David. I know, I've been getting a lot of Pac-Man lately. That's kind of retro cool. Yeah, I'm a Gen Xer. I played that. That was good. Anybody else? Mickey Mouse. Ooh, I'm a Disney guy too. That's pretty clever. If I were to ask you how many triangles are up here, what would you say? Some are saying 0. Some are saying 10. 8. Okay, so you've seen too many mind games. The typical, I would say there's 1 triangle, but I understand why you say no, because there's breaks in the lines. What's fascinating is that at first thing, if you were just to flash it and to say, okay, I'm going to show you a picture of how many triangles, boom. Most people would say 2. And that's because it's a part of our story wiring as human beings. The neuroscience is we seek to fill in the negative space. Think about this. For those of you who are major gift fundraisers, when are you doing your best work? When you're at butt in seat at your office or talking to a donor? Talking to a donor. Did you guys, those of you who run nonprofits, did you hear that? It's very hard to manage that because everybody else in the nonprofit is butt in seat. I know that they're doing their work. CEO can just pop in, say what he needs to say or she needs to say, and then pop out. Can't do that with a major gift fundraiser. The staff sees that negative space of not being at the office and it's, well, they're not doing their work. They can't really be working. Remote employees have the same issue. I don't see them. I can't get in touch with them. I have to leave a voicemail to talk to them as though it were a personal affront. And so what we have to do in coaching is help people shape the impressions. What are the impressions you're going to give? One of the things I did yesterday, here's a way we did that yesterday. Do you remember when I asked you all to hold up the flight book and do the action sheet? I specifically said, you're going to get you're going to get something out of every single session you go to, and you're going to want to write that down. It was setting the expectation, giving you some of the negative space to kind of draw your lines around of, oh, I'm going to learn something from every session. Because we've done this enough to know that even the bad sessions, you can learn something from. How not to do things, how to do things. I'm hoping that this will wait on the side of a good session, but we need to set those expectations for people. All right. It worked well for us, all this wiring, because it used to be we didn't have time to cognitively decide, is that rhino running at me because it wants to give me a big lick on my cheek, or is it running at me to maul me with its horn? We needed to make snap judgments and do that. So that's why filling in the negative space has been really helpful for us. In our 21st century culture, it's not as helpful as it has been in the past. Let me do, thinking about the negative space, let me try something here. I'm going to tap out a tune, and I'm going to ask you to say what song it is. So.
Happy birthday to you.
So what, do you guys heard Happy Birthday to You? What else did people hear?
Yeah, at the end it was.
Well, I kind of lost track. I was actually doing the Star Spangled Banner. It's Veterans Day, Star Spangled Banner. I tried it in the shower humming today, and not only is it ugly for me to hum, I'm just not very musical, but you could then catch some intonation difference. But with the tapping, it's the tune in our head. That's what I call it in leadership. We all have a tune in our head that we're listening to, and some of us will think it's a happy birthday. Some of us will think it's the Star Spangled Banner. Some of us will be, are you just a drummer? Is that Gula Geechee? What's going on here? But we have to address those songs in our head as we're going through storytelling. So, are you guys ready to dig into the 5? Have I convinced you that stories are important? I know. It's kind of funny doing this here because we, all of us as speakers, want to make sure that the repetition is helpful in building blocks, not just, yeah, we heard that every session. So we're just to know that we're talking to each other also. We're trying to get this going. There are 5 buckets, I like to call them, of stories that can help us all lead. These are a concept that I heard from a guy named Robert Rausch, as referred to by Andy Goodman. Andy Goodman is a masterful storyteller. He wrote a book, Why Bad Stories Happen to Good Causes. And he, it's well worth. He's the first one, other than my wife, that got me to start thinking about stories in terms of fundraising and nonprofits. My wife loved reading children's storybooks. And before she was my wife, I really dug her. I dig her even more now, but I really dug her then. So all of a sudden, children's storybooks became really cool. Oh yeah, I love Where the Wild Things Are. Like, I had read it. I was a theology major. I wasn't reading Where the Wild Things Are unless it was like an Aramaic or Sanskrit or something. So she got it on my radar screen, but then Andy Goodman shared this 5-bucket theory. Robert Rausch wrote it for politics in America, but I'm extending it a bit beyond that. You're going to hear me refer to some Hebrew scripture and some Christian scripture, because the 5 stories that he talked about actually transcend United States. They transcend North America. They actually transcend culture and time. And I want to show you that, just have an open mind, that these stories really seem to motivate human beings as we lead them and as we follow. And you notice I said as we follow. If you're a leader who can't follow, you're a renegade and not a safe leader. If you're giving a consultant, you need to know who the consultants are that they go to. If you have a coach, you should ask them, who's your coach? If you're an executive director hiring a major gifts officer, you should be saying, what are you reading? And, Chronicle of Philanthropy, what books are you reading? What videos are you watching? We all need to be learning, and if we're going to keep at the top of our game. So that was free. That wasn't in the notes or anything. All right. So the first one is your founding story. We're going to tell the story, and then I'm going to give you 2 minutes to kind of work on this, because we really desire for you to be able to actually have stuff that you're going to go back to your office with instead of just being fire hosed with information. So your founding story is your Genesis story. This is the one where Tom Ahern would say, what was your organization created what wrong was your organization created to right? What fight are you inviting donors into? I'll give you an example of this. My hospital, Inland Hospital in Waterville, Maine, where I was for a while, we had this really cool story. We were an osteopathic hospital in a largely allopathic medical field. And all of a sudden, I've lost most of you. Allopaths are the MDs, osteopaths are the DOs. So DOs are MDs that also understand body systems, not just how to fix a disease. And my dad's an MD, so I'm not dissing MDs, but they're holistic. They were started in 1943 because all of the MDs were overseas in World War II. And there were still sick people at home, and the DOs weren't allowed to enlist as officers because they thought it was quack medicine. Every movement has a weird founder, and so the DOs do too. But they decided we need to get together. How are we going to get together? And so my original story was, Inland Hospital was created to fix the healthcare needs of this community when nobody else was doing it here. They were doing it overseas, so it was awesome. It's not like they were being slackers, but they didn't, you have to frame your story. So I framed it really close. We have always been responding for the last 60 years. We've continued to respond and grow. That's a Genesis story. Took it to Andy Goodman, and I said, what do you think? And he looked at me and he said, Mark, that's a building or an organization. People respond to people. What are the people stories behind your Genesis story? So I dug deeper. One woman had kept all the scrapbooks from all the filings in the 1940s. There were stories of people, volunteers, knitting bandages to make this thing work. It was in a house. The x-ray department was in the basement, but the OR was upstairs. So they had to actually lift people upstairs to get this done. It was a bunch of people, just like your organizations, scrappily trying to get something together of very high quality. How many are in healthcare fundraising in the room? Okay, you guys are going to love this. It was 6 doctors in 1943, 3 men and 3 women, because DOs were always egalitarian from the start. So 3 male doctors, 3 female doctors. As a feminist, that got me excited. What got me excited as a fundraiser was that they all gave the equivalent of $6,000 each to get this thing off the ground. If any of you have to fundraise from doctors, you know how hard it is. It's kind of like trying to get blood from a stone. They think they're generous, and they are in many ways, but when it comes to money, that's not one of the ways. Actors are the same way. Lawyers also. It's very hard to have a generous lawyer or actor, in part because I think they don't know when the next hit's going to come, when the next case is going to be won, when the next show is going to be, they're going to be signed to. But that was a great story for my hospital. So we put it right in the most trafficked room, or hallway in the hospital, right outside the ED, about how these doctors got together. And so from then on it was, our doctors are always like this. They get together and they're incredibly generous with their time, their talent, and their treasure. All right, so I've talked enough about the Genesis story. I take a lot of time on this because I want this to be the one. This is an anchoring story that you'll all have. So go for it. We'll give you about 2 minutes, and it's a rough 2 minutes because my watch doesn't have digital. I'm using analog. So we'll just, when I say 2 minutes is up, it's up. All right, so we're having breakthrough moments over here, which is really exciting. Who wants to share, briefly share their Genesis story? All the introverts go, oh, I hope he's not going to look at me. Oh, I hope he's not going to look at me. Okay, great. Can you see if that's, I'll hold it.
Okay. You don't want me to take it from you.
See, how many people have been to this conference before? All right, a few. So I'll explain this. How many people watched Phil Donahue at one point in their life? Did he ever give a participant the mic? No, because he wanted to retain control of the timing. So it's like a meeting. When you have a sit-down meeting, people just kind of take all the time that they can. So I hold the mic. It's a control issue, but I just wanted to let you know I am not going to give you the mic, but I want to hear what you have to say.
Great. So I love the founding story of my organization. It started about 30 or 40 years ago. There were a group of friends who wanted a different way of life. They wanted to make the world a better place, and they formed a community, and they tried feeding the homeless and taking care of elderly people. Oh, wow. They rescued animals who were going to be vivisectioned from a lab, and eventually they ended up feeling that they always joke that the animals were more grateful than the people. And eventually they ended up helping animals, and we became the largest no-kill animal sanctuary in the country. Wow. And now our mission is to save them all, and we have a plan to end the shelter killing in this country by 2025.
Wow.
And it's a really
That's
cool story.
Cool. Very
There's
cool.
A lot more
And absolutely, there's a lot more, so she could definitely tell more, but thank you so much. That's really cool. Awesome. Yeah, what's the name of the organization?
Best Friends Animal Society.
Of course. Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. Very cool. So you have all sorts of different connections you can make with people because they tried different things. We've all tried different things to see how we could make it work, and that's all rooted in their story. Who else? Okay, thank you. I don't have to run as far.
Well, our story began in 1921. A little girl named Dorothy Love, she was 7 years old, was playing outside of her home, and a little boy, her friend, was chasing her. She ran into the street and was unfortunately hit by a car and killed. Some family friends were very grief-stricken. Moses Russell was the gentleman's name that was good friends with her father, Uncle Mosey, she called him. And he and his sisters donated their adjoining farms to her father's church. Her father was a pastor. His congregation wanted to establish a home for children and the widowed, and didn't have a plan on how to do that, so they donated their farms in Dorothy's honor. And in 1922, that became Dorothy Love Retirement Community, which is now has grown into a system of retirement communities, home health and hospice, all over Ohio.
Thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to stop there so we can go to the other four. But do you see how that is helping you, knowing where you come from? It knows your roots. Can you still hear me? Is the mic picking up? Is it still picking? Okay, good. I realized that the poor AV, I had two mics right at my together. So all of those of you listening at home, I hope that didn't hurt. The knowing our roots too. So as a Franklin Covey trained coach, I just wanted to anchor the personal aspect too. When you know where you're coming from, you have an idea of how your tree is going to be shaped and grow. And so as you know your Genesis story, it's important to know how you respond to that, how you respond to life. Yeah, I'm just going to be a little vulnerable here. I've been reading Brene Brown. We just moved from New England to Greenville, South Carolina. As a white male, I did not know that white male privilege was real. I thought everybody had the same opportunity in the United States. I am learning, as a feminist, I knew that there was misogyny and there was a lot of gender inequality. I thought the Civil War ended in 1865 because that's how we're taught. It was ended, and then we had a great boom with railroads because the North manufacturing. I am learning that there has been about at least 4 to 6 centuries of affirmative action for white men, that the systems in our countries and a lot of Anglo countries and these structures, and I don't have to earn respect when I walk into a room. That's part of my origin story. I don't have to, I'm given respect because of my gender and my genetic structure, which is totally unjust. And so I'm learning in this week in particular, I'm trying to figure out what's my response to that? How do I say, I am all this other stuff, I'm not what I look like? But that's part of what, if I didn't know my gender, my identity story, my Genesis story, I would just be, there. You wouldn't be as rooted in that. Coming to grips with it isn't always pretty. I guess that's part of the reason I wanted to share that. There's stuff that isn't right. There's stuff that, often in nonprofits, you got started because stuff was going wrong. It could be that just people wanted to make a difference in the world and they wanted to see where the right difference would be. But it could be that a little girl in a red dress got hit by a car. So don't shy away from that. When you share these stories, though, know who your audience is. I was asked once I was in Las Vegas talking at a social media conference, and this woman came up to me in tears telling me her Genesis story. She said, I cry every time I tell her my Genesis story. And I said, oh, that's fine, tears are good. Until she started telling me her Genesis story, and it was such raw emotion of the death of a child, and it was overwhelming. So I said, what might be good for you is to film this, to give another barrier for people so that they get your raw emotion, but it's filtered so they don't have to worry about what their face is registering to you as you're telling your personal story. So there are ways you can add that and buffer people, but emotions are good. All right, here's my favorite one. The second one is your mess-up stories. I call these the Balaam Stories. If you're familiar with Hebrew scripture, there was a prophet named Balaam who was just kept messing up. And finally his donkey had to speak to him. So the angel kept blocking his path, and the donkey kept stopping, and he kept whipping the donkey, and finally the donkey turns around and says, have I been in the habit of stopping before? There's an angel that's getting in the way. And so as a pastor, some of you may be offended this early in the morning to hear me say ass, but just let you know, I'm going to say that. As a pastor, I would share that story and say, and that's just proof that God can use any jackass to get his word out. But it's said, we need more than ever to be able to be in risk-taking organizations. Our organizations need to be able to take the risks for the right reasons. So we need to celebrate our mess-up stories. This is critical where you know what your values are. What are the mistakes that you want to make? We had the hospital I was at had the vice president of human resources had a special trophy, which again, I'll apologize again for saying the word ass, but it was a dumbass trophy. And they vied for it in their department every week. VP, senior directors, frontline admin, they would, and their value, the criteria for winning the dumbass trophy, it was a Spencer Gifts guy mooning sort of thing. And they would put it under their desk because they didn't want anybody else to see it. And it was like, he only trusted me enough to share it with me. But he wanted them to be so crazy service-oriented for employees that they went over the line and made a stupid mistake trying to bend over backwards to help their employees. And so they would all vie for it. Do you know how healthy that made his department? Because when you're able to say, oh no, I screwed up really bad this week for the right reasons. It's not like, oh man, I embezzled funds this week. It's not that. You don't want to, you have to know what values you want to do. But now, can you imagine, one of the worst things in our organizations right now is people don't want to mess up. And they don't want to tell you. They're trying to fix it themselves. Some of the biggest financial crises have started because of insider trading, things that went awry, and they kept trying to gamble and do more, and they didn't tell anyone. So this opens up the air. So what are some stories? We'll give you a minute. Just think of a story where you or someone in your organization have messed up for the right reasons, and that will help free other people up to be able to be led better. So does anybody feel like they kind of nailed it on the we really screwed this up for the right reasons? I know, it's asking people to go really. All right, Sherry, thank you. You're the icebreaker.
Well, first I'm going to apologize to my boss who's in the room. Just saying.
Are you sure you want to go through this?
I'm sure. So it has to do with our foundation board, which is our fundraising arm. And for the longest time, we had a previous executive director who was there for 35 years, a major force, knows everybody in the world, and I just remembered that this is being taped. Now I'm just going to apologize to everybody that I work with.
The whole world.
Absolutely. But we had a foundation board that was armed for fundraising. They were friends of ours. They knew who we were, and I mean friends meaning they know our organization, they know our mission, and they know what to do. At one point, we struggled with how do we get them to do more, and realized, and this is a previous trustee that's sitting here also who reminded me of this, what we neglected to do was to remind them of what we do on a day-to-day basis, what the benefit is, and why we exist.
Wow.
And so what we did is bring in our teams at every foundation meeting, take about 15 minutes, and have the team share who they are, what they do. And at the end of that, our board just sat there and went, wow, I knew this. I didn't know all of this.
Nice.
And we did that on a number of different levels. We brought in stories of one particular participant and how our programs have changed them. And so now, my boss, who leads our foundation board, does that every single foundation meeting. And can I put a plug in for Chris? A lot of what we learned, we did this beforehand.
Chris Davenport.
Yes,
Okay.
Chris Davenport, Movie Mondays. You all have to sign up for that. But we did this before Movie Mondays, but since Movie Mondays, there's a lot of good information that comes from Movie Mondays that my boss, again, giving her all the credit for this, has said, wow, we need to do this with our board, and it will take 5 minutes at the beginning of the meeting. And it has
Good.
really engaged our board much better. So we weren't cultivating the board maybe the way we should.
Yeah.
We are now, and we're seeing dividends from it.
And so thank you very much. That's awesome. Give a round of applause. It takes risks to do that. I guess what I would say for that, sorry for the people that I have my backs to, I'll turn my back to the camera so everybody feels offended. Okay, good. One of the things that could be the risk on that, to frame it, is we respected your time so much as board members, we didn't want to waste it. But in doing that, we realized we were not reminding you of why we're what we're doing what we're doing. I think that's brilliant. So where's Leah?
Over in that corner there.
Okay, I think you're brilliant. Yay, because I think every board meeting should have an unofficial agenda item of a story first. The only alternative that I would offer is there's a soup kitchen outside of Atlanta that will not start a board meeting without every board member doing 3 thank you calls to donors. Just, hi, this is so-and-so, I'm on the board with the soup kitchen. The staff tells me you contributed to us last month. Thank you so much. Can you imagine how much better your board meeting would go if you've either tapped into gratitude or you've told a story of life change? So I think that's very smart. All right, anybody else want to share how silly they were, how they goofed up? Was that? Oh, you're just waiting. Okay, you're just doing your hair. Sorry. I'm a verbal extrovert, so if anybody breathes, I'm like, oh, they want to talk like I do. Okay. No, nobody else? All right. Cool. All right. This is one of the more challenging things to do, but I submit to you as a leader, if you're not talking about messing up as a leader for the right reasons, and you will not lose leadership if you do this. Nobody expects you to be perfect. Oh.
This is a question.
Yeah, but we got to get it for posterity. No.
I'm kind of grabbing it. So at our table, we all admitted that this is very difficult to get out of people. So can you give us some advice on how to sell this to our leaders? Like telling messing up stories is actually a good, powerful thing that we should be doing?
As opposed to career suicide, right? Yeah, no, because it could be. Well, okay, so that's brilliant. I just assumed everybody would want to be better, and so this is a very big way of making everybody better. It's like ripping open the wound so it can get healed. I would submit to you that you have to be shrewd. You have to know if your boss is a scarcity boss or your board is a scarcity board. It could take a long time to get to that point. Often what we can't, I would not say, this isn't something you share with donors. This is like a staff training. When you're onboarding new board members or onboarding new staff, this is where you'd share that so that they can kind of get the vibe of what the organization is quickly. Does anybody have any wise ideas that they could think of? I would say go slow. Because you don't want to, if you like your job and you like the paycheck, yeah. What's that?
I said, I was thinking you were telling us to do them as external.
Yeah, okay. So there's a big sigh of relief over here. These 5 stories that every leader must tell aren't all external. The Genesis story is frontward facing. Thank you. The mess up story, oh yeah, I gotta explain the picture. The mess up story is internal and for onboarding staff. So you might want to try it as just test it out with volunteers. Self-deprecating humor can be very, very endearing if it's done well. But that's good. Yeah.
You had asked any ideas about how...
Okay, you've got one. Yep. Wait, let's get the mic.
We had an experience with a faux-friendly VP for advancement, and in dealing with her, it would have been much better if slip-ups had been described as errors caught in time. So they're really success stories that this didn't get too far, and this is how we caught it, but it loosened everybody up a little bit. And luckily, she left the organization before we really had to say this error did get too far, but we can all be better for it now. But even while she was around, we were all a little more at ease with slip-ups if we could describe them as actually success stories.
Okay, so framing it as success. Thank you. That's really helpful, especially in many of our cultures. We're risk averse. Nobody ever got fired for not hiring that same consultant again and doing what we did last year, but people get fired for not. Oh, yes, sir. This will be the last one on this because we still have 3 more stories to go through.
Thank you. I'm a CEO, and I think one thing that also makes a difference is the staff's attitude toward the CEO.
Yes.
Most CEOs I know really privately beat themselves up terribly.
Yes.
And they have the weight of the world on their shoulders every single day, and are actually think they're the worst people in the organization. But sometimes there's an expectation with the staff. If the CEO slips up, it's like, well, they make all this money, and they're the CEO. They should know everything. So your attitude towards your boss also makes a difference in their attitude and performance.
Wow. Let's give him a round of applause. That was really... I can echo that. No matter, one of my mentors said the view is always different from the captain's chair. And most people that get promoted into a position of leadership usually find that they have to pretty quickly go to their previous leaders and apologize because they just didn't see the full scope of what all was impacting the decisions. Thank you, Daryl. That was awesome. This is a mess-up story. I used to work at Inland. I have an endowment there. I owed pledges. I left that to do a gubernatorial campaign, and I got this fundraising letter in the mail. An external envelope and a business reply envelope. No letter. So I just thought that was kind of humorous. I was like, All right, so if I were still working there, would I get the words too and the nice signature or what? I knew what it was about. So you could try to make that into a, we wanted to say conserve a paper or something. I don't know, it could be a little hard. But be sure about, and this is where I talk about the trophy and the mess of stories. Okay, great. So the third one is suffering stories. These are the Jeremiah stories. These will be even harder, I believe. And in the interest of time, I'm not going to make you do this because you'll find the next one's easier. Let me just give you context for this, though. The suffering stories are Jeremiah. If you've ever read the Hebrew book of Jeremiah or Lamentations, it's just one long, depressing, this sucks. Ecclesiastes can be that way too. Life is hard. Is this how you treat your servants? And there's not a lot of, there's hope, and I'm an eternal optimist, so there's definitely hope. But sometimes life in our organizations is just awful. There are tough times that we have to go through, and we need to not necessarily embrace it as this is wonderful, but acknowledge it. And just say, like, 3 years ago, my mom died of ALS. That was awful. It was a blessing that she died within 6 months of diagnosis because her prognosis was going to be worse, slowly suffocating from the outside in with her muscles. But the mourning process of that long suffering just whacks you upside the head. You don't even see it coming at times. And so that's that kind of suffering story. Where organizationally this may happen for you, when I was working in one organization, we were having to do RIFs, reductions in force. And we had this transparent culture where all the managers came together, all the leaders, and every department showed their stats on a PowerPoint screen. And all of their revenue goals, all of their, it was a nonprofit, but their revenue goals, their performance goals, it was a hospital. Their dashboards were, are we in the green, red, or yellow, or red for each procedure that we do in the hospital? So basically, our CEO wanted a patient to be able to say, do I want to have my knee replaced at Inland? Ooh, they're not hitting their goals. They're in red right now. I don't want to go there. That kind of radical transparency. A lot of pushback from people in the organization. But we're going through this. It was 2008, and we had to do reduction in force. And it was just a bad meeting. I mean, all of us were trying to figure out where we could cut things. It got to the point where the CEO said, we are not going to do the 2-ply, 1-ply toilet paper question, because we've had that before. Do we go to 1-ply because it's a little bit cheaper? He said, this is the direction we're going. This is what we're going to do. And there was this settling in the room after a few hours. And then one person said, we've been here before, right? No, she said, we'll get through this, right? And there was like a little kindle of a flame. What? She said, we've been here before. Remember when the real estate thing in the late 80s? Remember when the dot-com bust? Or whatever the things were. We had to do this. It's not going to be good. It's not going to be pretty. We're going to have to make some tough decisions. People are going to get hurt, even though we're trying to be caring. But we will get through this, and we will end up hiring them back in a few years. And it was sort of this, your board needs to hear that. Boards will often just need to know there are life cycles in organizations, and there are times where it's just a rough time. It's under control as much as it can be, maybe framing it in success like we heard earlier, but not the, so it's not really a big problem. I've got a gaping flesh wound, but it's just a flesh wound. I don't have an arm, a little Monty Python. So just know that suffering stories is one of those. That's the keep going story. All right, the fourth one, this is the one I'm going to give you a minute or so to work on because this is really easy for us. We're so positively shifted, is our Phoenix stories. Oh, yes? Suffering, that's a great question. The question is the suffering story also an internal story? What would you guys say? Yeah, a good consultant answer is, well, it depends. And that's what I would say too, and I'm glad a lot of you are. It depends on the situation and your connection with people. There are some organizations that have an incredibly tight-knit group of followers that they're able to share this with. I would err on the side of really close to the family. I'm a big fan of transparency. Like in a board, I'm of the Simone Joyeuse school of thought that there should never be an executive committee on the board. If you ask me to be on the board, you want my brain trust and my wisdom or talent, and you shouldn't exclude me from that because there's 4 people that have a title. Just have the board make the decisions. So the board should be, I would say, let's be a little bit more transparent with the board, obviously. Thank you. Does that help? That's good. Okay. Because this, Phoenix, yeah, I'm going there. Yeah. So the next question is, what about the Phoenix stories? Can we share those with people? We want to share our stories. And these are good. These are great external and internal stories. So what differentiates the suffering stories from the Phoenix stories are the Phoenix was the bird on the ashes, that arose from the ashes. It also happens to be Dumbledore's pet, which is pretty cool in Harry Potter. But these are the ones that we're rising from the ashes. So one of the ways, we're binding together, we're fighting. I call these Nehemiah stories. If you're familiar with Hebrew scripture, Nehemiah, first of all, one of the first fundraisers, autobiographical fundraisers in history. He asked an emperor for money, and he was scared to death and says so in chapter 2. And when the emperor never said yes or no. He said, I want to go back to Jerusalem. And the emperor said, I think it was Cyrus, but it could have been Artaxerxes, said, when will you be back? And so as an totally excellent fundraiser, he took that as a yes. And he said, I would like a line of credit to have all the materials paid for also to build the wall. And there was one other thing he asked for. And historians say that when he went with an entourage, which means he was elected, he had all the trappings of having been promoted to governor of the province. It was really cool. So I'm a geek and a theologian and a fundraiser, and it's like, it's all in this book. It's so good. But one of the other parts of the story was there was attack. Not everybody was pleased with what he was doing, and that happens in our nonprofits. Not everybody is pleased with what we're doing. So there's a great scene where he has the people building the walls with bricks in one hand and swords in the other. So this is your bricks and swords story. Where is it that you've had to keep doing the work? You can't stop and just go overseas and fight the war, but you need to fight the fight. And 2 people so start jotting that down. But I'll tell you 2 groups that I see do this phenomenally well. And whether you like them or not, you have to admire their skill at having honed their stories so well. Planned Parenthood is an amazing Phoenix story. Congress is attacking us again, or this politician or that crazy, or Komen is reducing funding that's minuscule percentage-wise, but it's reducing funding. And so then Planned Parenthood rallied the troops to raise millions of dollars with that. Another one is NPR. You get Ari Shapiro. They're doing this in Congress again. Ari Shapiro here from NPR. We want to bring you the news that you need to hear unbiased. So your donation of $5 a month will help with that. It's that kind of in a fight thing. So I'm getting the 5-minute sign, so I want to make sure. How many people have fight stories like that? Would you be willing to share it? Sure. Okay.
I work for an organization, sorry, I know that rule. I work for an organization that has translated the movie Jesus into over 1,400 languages. Our ministry team in Nigeria was using the Jesus film in the native languages, going village to village, having outreaches, lots of people coming to see the film. And then Boko Haram was going in a few weeks later to kill all the new Christians. And so our staff decided that instead of doing public showings, they asked for funding for laptops and tablets so they could show the Jesus film door to door in people's homes, and Boko Haram wouldn't know who the Christians were.
Wow. Anybody else? Not that you have to top that. I'm not asking that, but wow. So, this is, all of our organizations have fight stories. Often, fortunately, they're not with people getting killed, or the results of our work isn't putting people at risk usually. But if you're in a domestic violence shelter, you're putting people that are coming to you are under incredible risk. And so there's fight that's going on there. And just an aside for those causes, my friend Vanessa Chase found out, she's on the board of Women Against Violence Against Women in Vancouver. They're a feminist rape crisis center. And they had a huge breakthrough in their organization when they realized the women that they're helping want to share their story. It had been this HIPAA type, in America we'd call it HIPAA, privacy thing. We don't want to exploit the people that we're working with and all this other good sounding nonsense, because the people wanted to tell their story. the first person that they said, would you share your story to donors too? She said, hell yeah, if I had heard this at 17, maybe I would have been a little bit smarter when that guy came at me. So there's power in telling some of these stories and helping the people that are still fighting the fight share them too. And then the last one, we'll end on a high note, is your glorious end stories. These are when everything is perfect, when your cause is no longer needed, there's no more mission creep because you've solved this problem and you're going to solve another problem. When the world is as you want it to be, when the wrong that your organization was created to right is accomplished, what will it look like? This is the one I was told early on that board members need to be reminding their executive director of. Because the executive director, in a good governance situation, the board hires the executive director or the CEO and gets out of the day-to-day. The CEO's job is the day-to-day. So staff are not supposed to be going to the board saying, I don't like the fact that they're doing it this way or they're not using the right font. Can you tell this ED this? It's none of that backbiting stuff. It's board hires CEO, supports their hire, doesn't abuse them or bully them like we're seeing a lot right now, which is just crazy. CEOs often, so those of you who work for CEOs, they're getting treated worse than we'd let kids get treated on a high school playground or elementary school playground. They're getting midnight calls. They're getting back meetings with board members, having special cabals. It's really sick in a lot of our industry. My wife says we're the only industry that actually celebrates codependency and dysfunction and hires to that. And this seems to be more codependent and dysfunctional. But these are the ones, so the board's job every 4 weeks is to come in and pull up the ED's head and say, see the horizon? Remember, that's where we're going. And then drop her head because she's got to be in the mud of the day-to-day. But then come back at a board meeting. The board meeting should be these visionary times to remind the CEO, you're in the good fight. We're behind you. And then keep doing it. Sense of trust and vision. So the glorious end stories are really key. And I've heard some people, do you have a question about that? Yeah, okay. So I think you may ask the question that I want to answer. So that's even better.
But the question I have is, listening to someone say we're going to end homelessness in 2025. Right. I work for an arts organization. That need doesn't go away. We are going to continually need to public fund arts because that's how the arts happen. So there is no definitive glorious end by 2020. Every kid's going to have art education. There's a whole generation that...
Yeah, and so for those of you, I used to work for, one of my clients was a veterans homeless shelter. And it's not, homelessness isn't going to go away either. No matter what president says it's going to go away by 2014. Last time I checked, there are still homeless vets. Oh well, we still have to work at it. So that's the question I wanted to answer is, what if it's an ongoing thing? What if it's a systemic human condition? And that's still dream big, hairy, audacious dreams. That's what leadership is built on. Tactical and all this other stuff, but what would it look like? Take the time to really give yourself that energy of, why did I get in the cause? What is it? What would the world look like? And motivate yourself to that. And call people to a higher standard. Even if the systems are not there yet for the better, calling them to a higher standard would say, we can be better than this, is that. Thank you very much. If you want these slides, give me your business cards, and I will be able to email those out hopefully by the end of the weekend. But thank you so much for coming here and learning. Appreciate it.